Hello and welcome to Skeptics in the Pub online. My name's Alice and I'm from the Merseyside Skeptics Society and I'll be your host for this evening. Skeptics in the Pub online is a collaboration between Skeptics in the Pub groups around the UK, which was born out of a desire to provide educational, engaging and social events during the COVID-19 pandemic. We've been putting on weekly events for over a year and we've built a wonderful community throughout that time. Tonight's event will begin with a talk from our speaker, Professor Manjit Dosanjh, who will speak for 45 minutes to an hour, and then we'll have a 10 to 15 minute break for you to refresh your glasses, take a comfort break, and after that we'll have a Q&A session. We'll be collecting questions as usual through Slido. The link will appear on your screen or be shared in the chat by our moderators, and you can also donate to Skeptics in the Pub online using the link SitP-online /donate, sitp.online/donate. Sorry about that. Speaking of the chat, we want our events to be as sociable as possible. So if you want to participate in the chat, you can find it either to the right of the video or underneath the video. Let us know what you're enjoying about the talk, where you're watching from or what you're drinking tonight. And if you want to continue chatting with us between events, you can also join our Discord channel, which the moderators should be sharing now. We do have moderators in both the chat and in our Discord, and we want all our spaces to be as friendly and welcoming as possible. If you see something that you think makes our events less welcoming or friendly, then you can either message moderators directly or you can send us an email at contact@sitp.online. After the event, we'll be hosting our usual Zoom pub, the Lock-ins Razor, and again, we'll share the link for that at the appropriate time. And you can also find that and all the information about our events and upcoming speakers on our website at sitp.online. Tonight's speaker is Professor Manjit Dosanjh. Manjit is the project leader for STELLA, Smart Technologies to Extend Lives with Linear Accelerators. She's an honorary CERN staff and visiting professor at the University of Oxford. She has a PhD in biochemical engineering from the UK, and she's been working in biology and medical applications for physics for more than 30 years across Europe and the US. She's worked at MIT, the Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory, and the European Commission Joint Research Centre. Since 1999, Manjit's been working at CERN to help bring particle physics into life sciences and share knowledge about physics with the wider society. Manjit helped launch the European Network for Light Ion Hadron Therapy, a multidisciplinary platform that focuses on collaborative approaches for particle and radiation therapy research in Europe. And if all that isn't enough, Manjit also works to help non-profit gender-related organisations in science and technology for development in Geneva, and is a board director for the International Cancer Expert Corps. Tonight, she's going to be focusing on the disparity in access to cancer therapy for patients living in low or middle income countries and how collaboration can be an important tool in helping to improve access in those countries. So please make sure to put lots of clap emojis in the chat window and welcome our speaker for tonight, Professor Manjit Dosanjh.
Thank you, Alice. And I wish I was really in a pub listening to you and talking to you and sharing some of these ideas. And as Alice said, I want to actually talk about how physics technologies can help meet the challenges in developing countries, particularly to do with cancer treatment, but health in general. And the title, as I said, is From Higgs to Health. And so most of you will have heard of CERN, founded in 1954, straight after the Second World War, as a place for collaboration. And I say the collaboration because that's what I want to focus on tonight. Collaboration for peace, excellent science, bringing people together from all over the world. And of course, the Large Hadron Collider and the Higgs, or the so-called God particle, but also the home of the World Wide Web, actually. So let me just start by saying that when I started at CERN 20 years ago, I was brought in as a biomedical medical person, and the previous DG used to call me the exotic species. And I asked him, why do you call me exotic species? Is it because I come from India? He said, no, because you're the only biologist at CERN, because we are full of physicists and engineers and so on. So from then on, I used to tease him saying, so if I'm a singular event, I'm rarer than the Higgs. So you can't do any standard deviation and I can do whatever I like. So this is why the idea of the title From Higgs to Health, because I really was brought in to see how physics technologies research and knowledge can be translated into health applications. And basically, I build bridges, mostly virtual, particularly because of the COVID times. And so the thing that really struck me when I joined CERN was how many people from all over the world could work together and collaborate on ideas which took years and years to mature. I mean, for example, the Large Hadron Collider took almost 20 years before the Higgs was discovered. And the magic ingredient for me, which was interesting, was collaboration, but also when they have a challenge, they don't say, it can't be done. Just say, so what do we need and how do we do it? So, and with that is where I want to start my first slide, because if they can do things which seem to be so impossible, then how about could we try to meet the challenge of cancer treatment, which is already a challenge everywhere. I mean, really globally. We all know people who suffered from it, who really personally or through the family and so on. But then this particular challenge actually becomes huge when you start looking at the dramatic disparities in access to cancer treatment. Actually, not even cancer treatment, being able to even detect cancer, and then to be able to treat it. So the challenge of disparities, so this is the big challenge here already. In Africa, is a country of 1.2 billion people, 55 countries, and 27 countries in Africa have no radiation therapy treatment. And if you look at this sub-Sahara red region, there's nothing at all. And when you look at the fact that if you want effective cancer treatment and radiation therapy is one of the keys, the recommended idea is that you should have one machine for about 200,000 people. And if you look at Africa here, the place that has the best radiation therapy actually is Mauritius. It's really French. It uses euros. It's a small island. You've probably been there. Some of you have been there for a holiday. And even that only has one machine for 500,000 people. So if you look at what's going on in Africa and then you compare, and I've just put some numbers in for UK, Switzerland, and US. So in the UK, we have almost 350 machines, 67 million people. So it's just about getting to the range where it meets the needs. And if you look at something like US, that's less than 100,000. But then you go to the other extreme of 27 countries having nothing, but Ethiopia having one machine for 115 million. So this is really a huge challenge. And one of the things, that's why I want to start with the slide, is challenges have to be met with knowledge, with information, with collaboration, and really trying to make strategies of how one can address them. So this is Africa, but it's not just an African problem. If you look globally, and this was a map put in by the Interatomic Energy Agency in Vienna, so only the places which are green have sufficient radiotherapy. And then, of course, Africa in particular is really suffering, but then lots of other regions also don't really have sufficient access to radiation treatment, cancer treatment, detection, treatment, follow-up. So you may say, well, what has that got to do with CERN and physics technologies? So let me just say that our physics technologies, we are truths of the trade are accelerators, detectors, computing. So we accelerate particles to almost the speed of the light, we smash them to pieces, then we detect them, and we use the analysis. And this is how, the Higgs was discovered. So these technologies are the basis of looking at Higgs. And so what about, can we look at these technologies and see if we can apply these to cancer? Well, have a look at this really old photograph that I came across. And here is our accelerator. Here's the detector, good old film. Here's our computer. poor guy, he has to, I think we can help him a little bit with our modern computers, but basically he has to remember everything in his head of the patient he saw. He probably can't even remember who he saw 6 months ago, let alone 5 years ago, 10 years ago. And then, of course, here's our Higgs, which is the patient. So you can see that actually the technologies can directly apply to medicine in that sense. And so, as I said, accelerators, treatment, imaging, computing. But for me, the magical ingredient coming from the medical field is the fourth pillar, catalyzing collaborations. It's almost invisible, but it's what really gets us to where we want to be, whether it's 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, but how to be able to use the expertise, use creative ideas, bring people together, and then actually collaborate together to make that happen. So bearing that in mind, that these are our magic ingredients, the fourth pillar in particular, let's have a look at the problem of cancer. So cancer is a growing global challenge. And in 2018, 18 million new cancer cases, 9.6 million deaths. And by 2040, the numbers are really horrendous, 27.5, 16.3. But what's even more telling is 70% of these deaths will occur in low and middle income countries. And radiotherapy is a key tool for treatment for more than 50% of the patients. And yet only 10% of the patients in low income countries have access. So how can we try to meet this challenge? How can we try to also leverage the technologies and the knowledge from the high energy physics community? So the challenge of treatment is, of course, you want to treat the tumor, the whole tumor and nothing but the tumor. But in order to be able to treat the tumor, you need to make sure you kill only the tumor cells and protect healthy surrounding tissues. And to do that, you need to be able to see it. If you can't see it, you can't deliver the dose to exactly where it should be. So let's have a look at technologies about what makes you be able to see. So detectors and the art of seeing, because this is one of the powerful tools within the high energy physics community, is being able to detect really new things, old things, protect, and even look for really, really rare events like the Higgs boson, okay? And these are the same basis, these detector techniques, to what is called X-ray imaging, CT, PET, positron emission tomography, MRI, magnetic resonance imaging, and so on. And I'm going to just go through a little bit of the art of seeing, and just to say, and art of seeing can happen in many ways. So I'm going to first just say, this is the very first time, and most of you have seen this X-ray image of Röntgen's wife's hand with this ring. It's the first time we were able to see below the skin without having to cut open the person. I mean, this is really amazing, the fact that you could actually see below the skin surface. Okay, so that's just X-ray imaging, and it started a long time ago, 1895, and for this, it was the first Nobel Prize in physics in 1901. And if you're really looking for how you can translate basic research into applications, is one of the fastest application from discovery to having a hand. And this X-ray imaging is now what has been exploited to make CT, computer tomography. So basically, all that is lots and lots of X-rays all around the body, and then reconstructing, using computing, using simulation modeling, and to be able to look inside the body and get into 3D. And this CT computing has really revolutionized medicine the way we know it now. Okay, and if you sort of think about the fact that what's happened in the revolution in photography, from going from here and now just pointing your cell phone and taking high quality photographs, videos, being able to share them with people instantaneously, actually, to see, look where I am, and then to store them. And you can even Photoshop them and do whatever you like with them. If you can imagine the same sort of idea with trying to do with X-ray imaging, this is where we are going now. So X-ray images, this black and white imaging, now we are talking about digital imaging and even color X-ray imaging. This was the very first human color X-ray image using Medipix, which is a pixel detector, but also for medical applications, being used in our detectors at CERN. But interestingly, I thought it was really rather odd that the very first X-ray image was a finger with a ring, and this time it's a wrist with a watch. It also tells you about the technologies moving in many ways. And then, besides X-ray imaging and really good quality imaging, this PET imaging, positron emission tomography, is something also which is a bit of a quantum leap, because X-rays give you wonderful images, but they don't actually tell you how your tissue is behaving, how your cells are behaving, are they fine, are they functioning normally? And what positron emission tomography does, it gives you an insight into the tissues and cells. And the way it does that is that you normally use glucose, but you could use other chemicals as well. So glucose is used by our cells for metabolizing glucose, for energy, for food, for growth, and so on. And if you actually label the glucose with this tag, which is called sort of something which will make positrons, and positrons, by the way, is antimatter of an electron. So when antimatter and matter come together, they come together, annihilate, and they produce light. So this positron, when it comes together with an electron, it makes a photon, it disappears, makes a photon, and this is what you are detecting in the positron emission tomography. So that's why I said antimatter is not just science fiction and angels and demons or Star Trek, but it's actually being used for clinical applications. And it's one of the powerful tools that's being used for cancer, because cancer cells are growing rapidly. To grow quickly, they need sugar, well, they need food, so glucose. So if you label the glucose and you look to see, and you will see lots of glucose going to where the tumors are, where the cells are, and then you get lots of light coming there, okay? But what is interesting about imaging, PET imaging, is, of course, you can see when the cells are growing fast, because that's what we are using for cancer, but you can actually do the opposite as well. So using the same idea, you can see if the cells are growing less well. So for example, here is an image of an Alzheimer patient's brain. So this is the light, glucose being utilized by a normal brain. And this is the one with Alzheimer's disease. And you see that the activity is going down. So PET imaging can be used for many things, but it is very much used also in cancer detection. And here I have this two photographs, and I want to point out the fact. So this is Peter Higgs in front of our CMS detector, CMS compact muon solenoid. By the way, compact in physics, but not so compact for us. It's like 20 meters, and it's really huge. And this is a normal PET machine, so it's, so for a person to be able to go in. But the other difference between these two machines, and I chose the CMS because, of course, all our detectors are able to detect photons, but CMS has lead tungstate. It's the scintillating crystals, which are what are used in clinical PETs to be able to detect photons. And of course, we can't afford the really, really expensive crystals like lutetium, which are used in PET, but we have lead tungstate crystals. So the technology is very similar, but the other difference is that here with CMS, we can detect all sorts of particles, okay? And I'm going to come back to that as to why that's important. But I mean, for physics, we need to be able, if you're looking for the Higgs and you collide particles together, the protons or whatever you want, and there's lots of particles, in order to discover something new, you need to be able to get rid of all the noise, i.e. the things we know. It's not really noise, but everything we know. So that's why you use and detect everything. Everything you know, you remove, and then you see what's left, and then look to see if that is typical of what, say, for example, a Higgs boson would look like. Whereas in the case of our clinical imaging, you're actually doing imaging normally with X-rays, with MRI, with PET tomography. So normally we are used to doing single type of detection. And the other thing I want to point out is, you see how the detectors at high energy physics are circular. And if you've had to go to the hospital to do a CT or a PET or MRI, they're always circular. There's a reason for that. And that is, you want to be able to detect everything. And being able to detect everything, you get a maximum signal. But also being able to detect everything, you can go back to see where the particles are originating from. So it makes your calculations, your mathematics, your efficiency really effective. So this is one of the reasons why most of the things, other than a chest X-ray, they are normally circular machines. So as I said, in physics, we use multimodality detection because we are looking at all the detectors, all the particles. And until David Townsend, a physicist at CERN from Bristol, came up with the idea, he said, why don't we use multimodality imaging in clinical settings? Since, we are familiar with being able to do that in the physics environment. So you see that you put the CT and the PET image, but the beauty and the advantages are, so this is an X-ray, multi-X-ray image, this is CT. So you can see there's the backbone, there's the heart, and there is something, because these are the lungs, the dark areas, there's something that shouldn't be there, but you don't know what it is, but it is something unusual. If you do PET imaging, positron emission tomography, you see that this area is glowing, so it's giving off light. So what you see is that this is a tumor which is growing, using lots of glucose, and you can detect this. So if you combine the two images together, so you have the precision of CT and the functionality of PET, you have a combined multimodality image which gives you much more precise information and knowledge which you didn't have. And this is the first time the idea of multimodality detection imaging came into the clinic. So nowadays, almost invariably, you're using PET CT, sometimes PET MRI, but mostly PET CT when you're doing cancer diagnostics with multimodality. So now we can see. So once you see, then what do you do to treat the tumor? So, okay, you know now that there's a tumor. Where is it? What is it? What do you do? So you have options. You have surgery. So that's the surgical removal of the tumor. There's radiation therapy, mostly irradiated from external angles. I mean, there is occasionally used brachytherapy, which is putting the radioactive source right next to the tumor. And then there's the chemotherapy. Now, whichever method you use, what you're looking for, of course, is survival, of course, but also quality of life. So you are looking for the best possible way of trying to destroy the tumor. Surgery is often used, but of course, if the tumor happens to be large or is next to critical organs, I mean, you can't remove everything, but you should remove all the cells possible. So this is why surgery is often followed by either chemotherapy or radiation therapy or both, for example, in the case of breast cancer. Radiation therapy, you can radiate from outside, but once again, the challenge is to really deliver the radiation to where the tumor is. And then chemotherapy is, of course, using chemicals to try to destroy the DNA, but it's hard, again, to be able to point it directly to where it should be. So there's lots of new developments which are making it more targeted, more specific, but these are the three modalities. Now, I want to concentrate a little bit on the radiation therapy, is because it's really used more than 50% of the patients with a really good cure rate, called the 3 C's: cure, conservative, because it's from the outside, and it's reasonably cheap. So, and the point of radiation therapy is that you point the radiation, whether it's X-rays, whether it's protons, whether it's carbon ions, to the DNA, and you try to break the DNA, because this is our material that we rely on. This is our code. This is what's replicated. This is what we use for making copies, for making proteins, for making all this. So if you can damage the DNA and stop the cells from replicating, preferably, of course, replicating the tumor cells. If you could stop that, that's what you're looking for. So I'm not going to go into a lot of biology because I really want to concentrate on the technologies of this. But these are the two things together. And what's happened is that with new detection, with new way of delivery, with better mathematics and treatment planning, we are getting better and better in improving delivery of the radiation to the tumor. I mean, in the 90s, we were actually treating the tumor like a brick. So we had 4 constant fields, and our imaging wasn't good enough, our treatment planning wasn't good enough. But now the current state of radiation therapy, the so-called intensity modulated, what it means is you use multiple converging fields to try to really target the tumor. Okay, so this is really the state of the art, if you like. And what is happening globally, and I don't want to talk about, the proton therapy and carbon therapy, because these are few machines with few percentage patients, but the most widely method used is electron linacs to deliver radiation treatment, and there are more than 10,000 in use, and they are widely available in all major hospitals in high-income countries, and that's really great. But then if I go back to my map again that I showed you earlier, so what about the rest? Because there are all these areas that don't have what they need, and yet we are saying LINAC-based RT is the current technology of choice. Why don't they have it? That's because the LINAC technology is complex, is labor-intensive, is high cost to acquire, to install, to operate and service. So this is our big challenge. When I was saying, can we use this thinking psychology, the way we work at CERN, of how to solve this challenge so that the whole world map becomes green? So can we use the technology developments from HEP, high energy physics, to address the current challenges and make RT more widely available? Well, we have to, because I want to give you an example here that every year, 2 million women worldwide are diagnosed with breast or cervical cancer. And what is really shocking is that 7 out of 10 breast cancer deaths occur in LMICs, and 9 out of 10 with cervical cancer. And when you look at the total numbers globally, there are 2.3 million breast cancer cases, 670,000, that's over 500,000 deaths, but 70% of this is happening in LMICs. And in this case, for cervical cancer, there are 340,000 deaths. 90% of those are in LMICs. And the thing is, when we talk about sustainable global challenges and development goals, these are these UN development goals. Goal 3 is about maternal mortality. And so not only are these women unfortunately dying because they cannot be treated, and cervical cancer, radiation therapy is your only choice, is that when these women die, there's a huge impact on child mortality. For every 100 women that die from this, 14 to 20 children die too. So it's not just them, it's the hardship, it's also the young generation dying. I have a couple of plots, but I don't want to spend too much time on it. But if there are questions afterwards, we will discuss the fact that, in cervix cancer, there's huge incidences, but huge deaths. But in breast cancer, there are huge incidences in the West, more so than even in LMICs, but the outcomes are much better. Breast cancer is now one of the most treatable cancers, and we have really good outcomes, okay? So I'll leave this for later. So knowing the fact that this is a challenge that we need to meet so that we can give help and choice to those 70% of the people who have no access. So this was our starting point of this thing is, how can we try to do that? So this whole project, STELLA, was medical Linux for challenging environments. So what we did as a starting point is what we normally do in physics. At CERN, high energy physics community, we bring all the characters and the people together, start discussing, brainstorming, saying, where are the challenges? What do we need? How do we go about doing it? So that was the first meeting we had at CERN, characteristics of a normal linear accelerator for challenging environments. And then the second workshop, and it's all about building collaborations and getting your facts together, was bridging the gap. And in this workshop, we were very lucky that STFC, that's the Funding Council, Science Technology Funding Council from the UK, said that they would fund us because they were very interested in these workshops as part of the Global Challenges Fund, that we could bring people from LMICs to the workshop and hear firsthand what their challenges were, because it's no good us thinking alone, not knowing exactly what's happening from them. So the second one was, how do we bridge the gap? And the third one, which was in Stretton, actually, near Manchester, it says Stretton, and that was, okay, so we want to do all of this, but can we bury the complexity so the machines deliver state-of-the-art treatment, but they are not difficult to use? They should not be complex. So it's like, well, I shouldn't use the iPhone, but the idea of a phone which is really easy to use, but behind it is all the complexity. So the third workshop was bearing the complexity. And then we had the fourth workshop, which was really the turning point, I think, in many ways, because we talk about building collaborations. We were lucky enough, and that was the last meeting really that we had in a large way for this. It was March 2019 in Gaborone, Botswana, where we actually met our collaborators from Africa, from Nepal, from various places at the grassroots to show that, we want to hear from them firsthand. And actually that really moved the collaboration to the next level, because they understood that we weren't just sitting in Geneva or in London or New York talking about this. We really wanted them to be part of this, not only the challenge, but also the solution. And that was what really emerged as Project STELLA, smart technologies to extend lives with linear accelerators. It's a unique collaboration, physics, medicine, accelerators, collaborations from Africa and other LMICs. And the goal is to design a disruptive technology for the treatment which can become widely available. And Project STELLA is 3 pillars. So the LINAC, the linear accelerator prototype, which is, we want to revolutionize the way the treatments are delivered, but with the help of software, integrated platforms, artificial intelligence, machine learning, for not just for the treatment, but also for education, for training, for getting second opinions, for really cloud computing, all of these ideas. But all this hand in hand with the third pillar, which is training and mentoring. Because in the end, machines on their own don't treat patients. It's people, it's experts do that. And, there's a huge shortage of experts in developing countries. So these 3 pillars together is what makes the STELLA project. And the goal in the end is robust, modular, reliable, simple to use, affordable, with the aim really to extend access to RT globally. So what do we normally do in our experiments and in our challenges is to gather data, to get facts. So we were funded, fortunately, by STFC, this project called ITER, led by Professor Burt from Lancaster University, innovative technologies towards building affordable, equitable, global radiotherapy. And it involved gathering information from our African collaborators regarding their challenges, what they think are the challenges they face. in providing treatment. Identifying these challenges with really day-to-day experience, and then use all of this information to create design specifications for a machine which can help to meet these challenges, and then assess the application, as I said, of machine learning, of artificial intelligence, use of cloud computing to make smarter machines, but also make smarter delivery, okay? And all this to be put together in a concept design report. And I think, by the way, this meeting must have been destiny that I should be talking about it today, because this concept design report has just been sent out to the international reviewers to ask them, what do they think? Are we on the right track? What can we do differently? So it's actually just finished and it's just been sent. So I think, as I said, it's really meant to be that I should be giving this talk today. And what we did in this questionnaire for the data gathering is we asked a range of questions. And, to all our users, we examined, the environment, the services, the subsystem, the treatment, the imaging, training, internet access. And then just to make sure that we had a handle on this, we've also surveyed facilities in the UK, Canada, USA, and also actually Geneva for comparison, to make sure that, our fact-based observations are holding true and there aren't other parameters that could be entering into this. So we were so fortunate that, having really built our collaboration over a number of years with the workshops that I discussed, and those were really important to build credibility, to build trust, to build sustainable relationships, that we managed to get all 28 African countries that have RT-based treatment to respond to our questionnaire and tell us about their experience and what challenges they face. And, interestingly, not so interesting, unfortunately, this is a map, a very preliminary map, showing how much time the machines are down. And if you look at Madagascar, this machine is down more than it's on. So it's clear that we cannot have such a situation. And you may have heard last year, for example, there was a BBC interview with this young woman from Zimbabwe who had started her breast cancer, and then the machine broke down. There are 5 machines in Zimbabwe, but none of them working. The spare parts couldn't be got because there was COVID. It has to come through South Africa, has to be fixed, and so on. And it was really emotional listening to her saying, I started looking at papers to see what are the effects if you don't get treatment for that long. And she said, nobody ever even wrote about the fact that you could have treatment stop for 6 months or 3 months. You could find a couple of weeks, you could find something. And the fact that, that in this day and age where you should be able to do this, and there were 5 machines and none of them working and they couldn't get the spare parts. So this is the sort of thing that really drives our collaboration with all the people who are really passionate about doing this. Is we want to be able to see how, what happens, what can we do, how can we make a difference? And one of the things that came out was, there is delay in repairs, lack of funding, they don't have spare parts, they don't have engineers, they have fluctuating electrical supply, corruption, all sorts of things. And also, this one is a really interesting diagram here. This is from Graham Burt from Lancaster, is that fact, this is the Western perception of what the challenge is, but this is what our colleagues want. They don't just want a cheap machine, they want a really high quality, reliable, with good performance machine. So they don't want cheap, poorly made, second-hand class treatment and given old models. So we need to find a solution that's going to overcome the challenges which we have discovered, which are the local repairs and access to parts, software, all of these fluctuations, etc. So this is, these were our conclusions so far. And the parts that break down a lot, these the electron gun, vacuum pumps, the multi-leaf collimator. I will come back to that in a minute because this is what shapes the beam, software, power fluctuation, all sorts of things. So this is what now has driven us to start looking for or designing the concept design report, as I said, to see project goals for the new machine. Priorities, the machine itself, the cost of repairing technical failures. So can we reduce the failures? Can we make them easily upgradable? Can we do all of these things? The environment, can we make machines which are less vulnerable to fluctuations and minimizing power requirements? Can they also be robust to temperature fluctuations and high humidity and dust? We thought about the fact that a lot of our sub-Sahara, where that red region you saw, they have lots of sun. Perhaps we could talk about solar panels. And when we were discussing with some of our colleagues, they said, yes, but who's going to clean these solar panels? We have so much dust, so much pollution that we need to deal with that as well. But, so these challenges of this type, which seem an obvious solution, but sometimes they don't work. And, looking at the initial cost, but the cost of repair parts and delivering higher doses to be able to get really good conformity. And at the same time, as I said, about staff training, skill requirements, ongoing education, sharing experience, mentoring, and also not doing this helicopter trips, you just land and disappear again, because we need sustainable solutions. So we need twinning, we need partnering, we need to make our experts in the region stay, and they become the experts, they become the catalysts. So we get them to be the leaders, because I think sitting out there here, we cannot make that sustainable. So all these things have to go hand in hand. So as I said, from higher availability and reliability, okay, this is what we are looking for. And repairs that, which are difficult, let's try to reduce the repairs and also the availability of spare parts. So let's choose designs and components to improve the lifetime of the machine. Choose components that can be replaced in-house with cheap spares. And as I already said about learning and AI, and one of the things we want to do, and to avoid what the story I was telling about Zimbabwe, it's not a story, unfortunately, it's true, is can we not use all this new machine learning and artificial intelligence to predict faults as an early alert system so that parts can be already ordered ahead of time, rather than finding out the last minute that you're without any treatment. So really trying to do early warning, early alert systems. And then this thing about the MLC, I just wanted to mention this because when I showed you the accelerator, there's the accelerator and the MLC, these multi-life collimators, they shape the beam to deliver exactly to the tumor. So one of the things that's been happening as the development, they are wonderful, they deliver very well the tumor dose, but it's multi-leaves, so there are lots of leaves. And what has happened in the design is you keep increasing the number of leaves, but they get caught, they get damaged, and it's one of the parts that breaks down a lot. So we are wondering, but we don't know, this is one thing to be still looked at, is if we could make them simpler and easier. So, and these are quite expensive parts and they break down a lot. So if we could do that, we don't know, but we will see. And so the current status is the CDR, the concept design report, ready, just sent. Here's Graham in charge of the ITAR project here, and Deepa, who's our technical leader for the STELLA proton prototype for the LINAC. So the Daresbury team are already in action, starting to look for the prototyping. So, we've got ideas, we've got concept, we are starting to work on this. And the thing is, I want to just finish off with is the power of seeing and understanding the challenges together and collaborations that help to solve problems in a sustainable way. So I just wanted to say, that's why I wanted to say, we talk about CERN. Of course, CERN is an amazing place. We have technologies up to, wherever you like, the cutting edge, accelerators, detectors, computing, of course. But the thing that we at CERN take for granted, but is something that is so powerful, is collaboration and working together and listening to people and finding solutions together. So I just want thank you all for listening to me zabber on about the fact that this is something that's a challenge that we have to meet it. We cannot ignore it. And it's not just for developing countries, because if you make machines which are robust, cheap, easy, affordable, and small, it's also needed for remote regions everywhere. In the UK, you have to travel on average 2 hours to get your treatment. So UK is such a small place. So can you imagine in a place like the US? I mean, there are huge challenges. So the idea of this technology is to be able not just to give hope, but to actually use the technologies and knowledge for everybody's benefit. So thanks.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Manjit. That was a fantastic talk. I'm sure everybody in the chat will agree. I can see the chat going crazy, lots of clap, 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 and people have been engaged the whole way through. So it's been a fantastic talk. Thank you very much. We are going to take a short break now. We will have a 15-minute break. For everybody at home, you've got the chance to go and make yourself a fresh drink, take a comfort break, but also don't forget to head on to the Slido to ask as many questions as you want to ask of Manjit, and we will go through those after the break. And also you can upvote any questions that you particularly like the look of in that Slido page. So if you can't think of a question, do go and have a look at those questions anyway and give the ones that you want to see answered and upvote. And we'll be back in 15 minutes to take those questions. Thank you very much. Welcome back, everybody. We are back here with Manjit to answer your questions from her fantastic talk about access to radiotherapy and different kinds of technologies in lower and middle income countries. So I'm going to fire into the first question. Manjit, we've got a question from Skeptical Gumby who asked, what do you think would be the best way of increasing access to diagnostic and therapeutic technology?
Okay, so, well, there are a number of answers to that, of course. So one of them is to actually have machines and technology which are readily available and easy to use and of course, are affordable. This is one of the, because we've already seen that even from the few places that have Linux, complex technology out of context isn't necessarily the solution. So the best thing is to try to have technologies which are suitable for the environment, which are easy to use, and or both provide training and expertise so they can be absolutely used and not just become white elephants.
Yeah.
Okay, and I think this is really a must. And I think it shouldn't be just, there's the customer and there's the user. It has to be built. I mean, if you want a sustainable solution, there has to be built on a relationship. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think, and the technologies, the best thing is, of course, if you can make them cheap and quick, but they have to be effective, they have to be easy to use, and they must be easy to fix.
Yes.
And
yeah,
this is
and I guess that's a real challenging thing that a lot, particularly companies that are going to be selling these things and wanting to make money out of them, it's great for them if they can have a service charge and they will come out and fix it, but that can't work on the ground in some countries because you need to be able to fix it yourself.
Now, and you see, the thing is, interestingly, and I can understand the companies because, they have their shareholders and they have to make profits. I understand that perfectly. But I'm with a heart in my sleeve because I really want to be able to help the people who need it. Yes. So interestingly, we did look at the service contracts in Africa, and the cost of a service contract in Madagascar, in Nigeria, in whatever country you want, Sudan or whatever, it's almost the same as it is in London or New York or Washington. And yet they can't deliver the service when they want because there's a lot of lag time, so they're paying the same amount because they can't negotiate.
For a worse quality service.
And they only have one machine, what they're going to negotiate with, right?
Yeah.
So I understand the companies, but I think the thing is
bridging that
gap so it becomes sustainable. And, and if you have, say, for example, I'm talking about imaging, but you could also be talking about treatment. if you have one machine, you're supposed to be treated for 4 or 5 weeks, but this machine, and these people are living in rural areas, they don't have good transport, they spend hours going there, and then if the machine breaks down and they don't get treatment for a week or something, they want to come back.
No.
I mean, I was talking to the radio-oncologist in Tanzania. She's one of the rare species of female radio-oncologist in Ocean Road, treating breast cancer. She said, I have women coming who have to travel 6-7 hours with kids to my place. And she said, and basically all I can give is palliative care. So how should I answer this?
Yeah.
And so so you definitely need, when we talk about, there's a question already about imaging and detection and treatment and so on. Of course, sometimes it looks like there's low incidence cancer, but that's because they don't have the tools to be able to diagnose it. Yeah. And then you have to be able to diagnose it early. So because we know very well for cancer, the earlier the detection, the better
the better chance. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And we do have a related question when we're talking about servicing machines and getting machines working reliably for long periods of time, especially if you've only got one machine in a country. I'm not going to try and pronounce this user's username. I'm very sorry. But they asked, could 3D printing be used to make spare parts on site?
Well, yes, but then you have to have all the technology and tools
and 3D printer
to be able to make them
and maintain the 3D
so
printer.
It's a circular question, right? So yes. But unfortunately, this only works in high-income countries where we have all the tools, right? But yes, that obviously is something we've considered. But, there are,
And I guess part of the challenge is trying to encourage companies to come up with the low-tech options, because we always want more high-tech, more impressive, more fancy options. In some countries, actually, you want as low tech as possible, at least to get that kind of daily use.
Well, interestingly, I understand where you're coming from, but if you have really high-tech solutions in high-income countries, and this has happened now in a number of low-income countries, they don't want to be treated like second-class citizens. They don't want the cheap technology. They said, if it's not good enough for you, why is it good enough for us?
That totally makes sense. But the tech that you've got just has to be reliable.
That's right. If it's reliable and it delivers the quality treatment, imaging, diagnostics, and so on, the same level, this is how you have to, say, one can think about a self-treating machine, a Tesla, right? Can you imagine a Tesla radiotherapy machine in the middle of Sudan? I mean, I'm doing extremes, okay? So, you could actually have a self-treating treatment machine, and that would look great because you don't need expertise and so on. So I think there's a balance, and it's true that we need really reliable treatment technology, which is also appreciated by the users. They should not feel that they have been treated like, poor neighbors, so to speak.
But in some cases, actually, I'm sure there will be cases where reducing the tech makes the machine better in some ways.
So you see, this is why we want to say that we want to take the complexity out. So it's easier and simpler to use and it's more robust. But the delivery and the actual quality of treatment is as high as ever.
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely.
So this is what we're looking for. When we say robust and, hide the stuff. That's it. Yes. Because they have to be more robust in this environment because of, high temperatures, high gradients, humidity, electrical power that keeps coming out in and out. So if the machines are really sensitive and so on,
climate,
and and they break down, the vacuum pump goes down. So yes.
Yeah, well, in the lab that I work in, I do a lot of mass spec stuff, and what we have to do is have high air conditioning units to keep our machines cool. And we're in Liverpool. It's not like it's hot here. I can imagine if you've got a massive radiotherapy machine in sub-Saharan Africa, then you're going to have those challenges with the temperature.
Absolutely. And you might have enough electricity and power to be able to do this, but then you combine that with temperature and humidity, the combination, it just can't cope. And my colleague who works in Abuja, he said, we treat our computers and machines better than we treat us because we can't afford to cool everything.
We've got a question from Gray the Earthling while we're talking about low-tech solutions, who asked, what's the cleverest or most effective low-tech solution you've seen for a seemingly complex problem?
Well, I'm going to say something really stupid, okay? That is, you look for a needle in a haystack. The most stupidest solution is you use a magnet.
Yeah.
No, but I'm sure there are other things, but that's, it's a very interesting question, because I think sometimes we are too complicated in the way we look for solutions. So the idea is to look for smarter solutions, not necessarily the most complicated solutions, because as long as they solve our problem, and they do that.
Well, actually, simpler and more low tech is better if it can be. We shouldn't call it
low tech. We should just call it cleverer, because then it's more sellable. If you see what I mean.
Yeah, I totally appreciate that.
Yeah. No, but it's a very interesting question. Not in my field. I don't know what I have to say. I mean, I have to think about that.
You work with the high complexity imaging systems that you're using that. Mm-hmm. It's easy to really, especially for cancer, prioritizing imaging is so important, because you can't see inside the body without it.
That's right. And but I mean, it's really amazing when you think about it that, I mean, PET, CT, MRI, these are really recent things, and you can know about something, and then it takes 20, 30 years to come into realization. I mean, it's the same thing. I think that what's the simplest example I can think of is, magnetic resonance imaging. It took 50 years before it became a medical device. That the Nobel Prize was forever, and the same thing for antimatter. I mean, the idea of PET is known, but so sometimes it takes time for that technology to come into everyday use, because it's expensive or it's complicated or people don't know. And then also when it wants to be mass produced, the companies have to be able to make profit with it. So what is the point where they think that it's worth mass producing? And I was in the US when the PET technology came in. I mean, you can't think of using a PET as an annual checkup.
Yeah.
Because why would you do that, right? Because
the cost would be prohibitively.
Right? But, so there was anyway, okay, let's not.
Although, of course, you then end up with problems of people using them for their annual checkups.
That's precisely it. That's what I'm saying. And, and you can. And also, if you happen to be in a very wealthy country and you have a really good health insurance and so on, you might start thinking this is an essential thing you really need.
Get all these tests done and find all these benign things that you go chasing.
And sometimes people ask me about the fact that, but doesn't like PET imaging and CT cause damage? Of course it does. And so does radiation therapy treatment. Mm-hmm. But it's a balance between what you need and what you can't do without, so it's always a combination. So of course, if you didn't need a PET imaging or an X-ray image or anything, great. But
if you do need it, you should be able to get access to it
and be able to get the best
version of it.
Version of it with the lowest possible radiation exposure with the highest resolution.
Yeah. We've got an anonymous question. Somebody asked, is the increase in deaths from cervical cancer, which you highlighted in your talk, in low-income countries just due to the lack of treatment, or is it related also to the lack of cervical screening?
Okay, so excellent question. Of course, you need to diagnose it. But in these countries, even if you diagnose it, if you can't treat it, what do you do?
Anything about it,
This is really the heartbreaking thing. Yes, of course. I mean, I think that a lot of the incidences would be much higher if there were, diagnostics available, of course. So that's one of the reasons why sometimes the numbers look low. But it's, if you can diagnose it, you need to be able to treat it, right? How can you tell a patient you have something, you have
there first,
you have it, but there's nothing we can do about it?
Oh God, it's something that we don't automatically think about because we have the luxury of both options. And the thing is, and cervical cancer also, because they basically no alternative, and by the time it's really rather late, and they are just It's one that the symptoms only progress quite late, right?
And it's horrible. There's nothing you can do if you don't have access, and they are basically ostracized,
Yeah.
It's not a very, and then the consequence, as I said, is also the kids being left as orphans and all of this. And this is, and by the way, it's something now we know that the vaccine.
Yeah. So what is vaccine access like in low and middle income countries?
Not
non-existent or very low.
Not as good as it should be, right? Okay. Because this is why now in Europe and US and so on, particularly in the next generation, I mean, basically cervical cancer
should go extinct.
Right?
Yeah, because it's only been introduced fairly recently.
Yeah.
Nadia asked, do you also educate the population about the safety of diagnostic tools and importance of screening, as some people believe they are harmful?
Of course, it's a must. And actually, we haven't done that in Africa, but this is needed everywhere, right? The importance of screening diagnostics and the pros and cons. This is what I was saying. Yeah, they can be harmful, but also what are the advantages, and why should you do it? I mean, why were we doing breast cancer screening, right? We know that that's helping a lot as well. So, and of course, the ideal thing would be, yes, education is important, is key. Early detection in cancer is everything, actually in all diseases, but particularly in cancer, because otherwise, once it gets to the stage where it metastasizes, it's really a uphill struggle. So, and then, of course, what we should be, of course, spending our time on is making diagnostic tools which give, as I said, high quality imaging with lower doses, right?
Yeah.
That's and that's happening a lot with a lot of these new detectors also not coming out of high energy physics and all the others, where you can get really good quality images with really much lower dose because you're doing digital, you're doing 3D, you're doing better resolution. I mean, for example, the PET I was talking about, if the crystals with which you count the photons, if they have better efficiency, if your electronics are better, all of this. So yes, I think education and raising awareness and the pros and cons are a must, actually. And that's probably even more so in high-income countries.
Yeah, definitely. And I guess a big part of it must be understanding the communities that you're communicating with, because every community has different concerns and different
and
priorities
and all sorts of things. You see, I mean, I didn't show the slide in the end on prostate cancer, because in some countries, the problem of prostate cancer is that it's a taboo subject. They don't want to go there. And then by the time it's diagnosed, it's really, and it's the same for many things, okay? Cervical cancer is another one. So I think being aware of social, cultural differences and how to handle all of this is also very important.
Which I guess is exactly why those collaborations are so important, because you could have this stunning idea about how to fix things in sub-Saharan Africa, but you speak to the medics there and they tell you, well, if you're going to pitch this idea, we've got to pitch it this way because people won't want it the way that you're pitching it. That's important information.
And also, you see, it starts even earlier than that. If you are working at a higher level, say, for example, a machine, we can talk about a radiation therapy machine, okay? I mean, that's fine. That's what I was talking about. If you're only talking at the government level that you need a machine, but you haven't discussed with the grassroots level, and vice, I mean, it's so. I think, of course, you need the power, you need the resources to buy the machine, but then you need the people who are going to be using it
actually put it
on
into
board.
Place,
And what they'll say is, well, what good is this machine if I don't know what to do, right?
Yeah.
So this is where this idea of mentoring, building bridges, twinning, and all of this, trying to have them on board and saying why it's important. And, and then that Linux are complicated to use, but they are really much more, shall we say, a better way of delivering treatment than the old cobalt sources, which is, radioactive source, which has 6 years half-life. This is what the original machines used to be, and there's lots of quite old machines. So, and they are easy to use though. Okay.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, after 6 years, the radioactivity goes down. So the patient has to be treated longer. You get more damage to healthy tissues and side effects and all of stuff. And I didn't mention any of that, but also replacing the cobalt sources, one, because they deliver better treatment, but also in the world we are living in, if you can't dispose of the radioactive sources, there is the other terrorism type threat that happens as well. So there are, and I mean, in the US, I know that, blood radiators of the cesium type are disappearing, and we are using X-rays because there's less risk. So, but then that's fine, but then you have to give them an alternative, right?
And I guess this is absolutely why that multidisciplinary aspect is so crucial, because you've got to think about it from every angle.
This is it for me. Of course, the technologies are must, but this is why when I came to CERN, that's the thing that blowed my mind, because, in biology, we're not very good at collaborating, because we have small groups and we also have, we have lots of competition. You can do research in small groups and if it doesn't work in 3 years, you get more funding to something else. But in an environment like when you're looking for the Higgs or whatever you're going to look at in the future, these machines are expensive, they are huge, they are technologically the generation, whichever. So they are really, they need to think about working together, because they're only going to have one LHC, right? Yeah. So this is the thing for me at CERN, coming as an outsider. It was the way of working together and collaboration that really, I thought this is just magic. Science. This is really magic. And then this idea, when you ask physicists, can you do this? They never say you can't do it. They just said, so what is it? What do we need? And how much time do we have? And how do we get it?
We'll figure it out.
We'll figure it out. I mean, it never occurs to them that something can't be addressed. And that's an amazing way of looking at things. Yeah. And that's where collaborations come in, not just because culture and people and different ways of thinking, but it's also different people have different ideas, imagination, all these things. And then if you do addressing a difficult challenge, you need those really creative, crazy people together. Okay. Yeah, and then, and some of the people to be able to sort out what's crazy and what's really smart. It's not me, I can tell you. I mean, I just use their technologies and their wonderful stuff. But if you haven't been to CERN, the thing that, as I said, blew my mind was the collaboration, but also when we have some VIP guests, rather than sitting in the glass box, it's like a fishbowl, right? Yeah. People look at you. A lot of people who know about CERN, they want to sit in the cafeteria, because you can sit randomly at a table, mostly young people, because our users are really young generation, and they'll be speaking like 5 or 6 different languages. Wow. And it's amazing. It's like a melting pot of ideas, of thinking, and so on. And this is why, for me, it just became obvious that collaboration is the way to go.
Forward, yeah.
And we really have to people around the table, and not just say, oh, we are solving your problem. I wanted to show you the cartoon, but I thought, no. I have this cartoon done by David Townsend, who's somebody who's a physicist from CERN, who actually, did the PET CT thing. And he's got a physicist saying to the physician, because basically in French, they sound almost the same, I've solved your problem. They said, I didn't know I had a problem. So, and this is, and if you're living in a world like that, it doesn't work so effectively, shall we say. And it can be for any challenge, by the way. It doesn't have to be cancer. Yeah. It can be environment, it can be climate, it can be food security, whatever you want. If you have the people with the knowledge, with the challenges, with the ideas and technology together, I think is really the best way forward. Yeah.
We've got a question from Dave the drummer, who asked, STELLA seems like a convergence of many technologies, which is a fantastic thing. Are there other applications that LMICs could use to improve their conditions?
Yes, lots. I just said that, right? I mean, the first thing would be food on the table would be nice. Yeah. I mean, health is great, of course, because without health, you don't get food. But yes, lots of things. And they all need thinking out of the box and in the box, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, absolutely. You've got to have those creative solutions, but also the reliable, quick ones.
And there's no point second guessing people. You actually have to have the people around to say, look, you think it doesn't work, we've tried that. And it was like we were talking about solar panels. We know in the end the electricity problem is going to be solved by solar panel, obviously, because in Africa and so on. But how to make it reliable? Maybe you'll have to have self-cleaning solar panels. I mean, you have self-cleaning glass
A lot of
nowadays,
dust,
so
yeah.
you know, right?
Yeah.
So, so when there's a problem, there's always a way to solve it. You just have
But
to.
you need to identify that problem, which
That's
you
right.
might not. If you're putting solar panels on roofs in Britain, you might not think about the dust.
Well, you don't have dust, you just don't have sun.
Yeah, so you've got a different problem to solve.
But seriously, I mean, it's really interesting when we were saying that. And, I was thinking maybe because they do have power shortages, that we could have I joked about Tesla, but I wasn't really, but, the solar power batteries, so that during the day, all these trucks deliver because there's lots of stuff is on the road because they don't have other ways of doing freight. And in the evening, maybe they can just park their truck next to a hospital and they could run on this. And then in the morning, off they go again.
I guess that must be a part of the, not problem, but in parts of the world where you've got a lot of sun, how do you store that energy if you can't use it immediately?
Well, I was thinking, these big batteries on lorries and trucks and things, and just use them as sort of power sources at night, right? I don't know. I mean, somebody who's much cleverer than I am will come up with an idea, but I think there are ways of doing this, yes.
But they need to be part of that collaboration to actually... Dave J asked, are other diseases being targeted by the technology that's being developed at CERN?
Well, the recent, we've done lots of work on COVID recently, of course.
I can imagine, yeah.
But also we are doing, there's lots of detected stuff. So yes, other diseases.
We showed some images of an Alzheimer's brain.
Yeah, so I was going to say, I mean, I didn't talk about, I'm just talking about standard radiation therapy, X-rays, which is the most effective and so on. But, there are also high intensity particle beams using carbon, and which is it's like going from a torch to a laser pointer and so on, and using some of that technology, for example, for epilepsy ideas to really target these things. And then heart disease, because nowadays, if you do, if you have to strip off the fat, the atherosclerosis stuff, you can use high intensity proton beams, which would be much faster. Things like this, ablation, for example. And yes, so there are
lots of applications.
Applications, but this one in particular, I was looking at, of course, is that cancer is the second, biggest challenge for health, and
increasingly so, because the longer people live, the more cancers they encounter.
I noticed a question, by the way, and I take the advantage of that, is that cancer is a multi-step process, multi-step disease. So the longer you live, unfortunately, the more chances are that you will have enough mutations to get cancer. So there's pros and cons to living longer, right? And in developing countries, the age, of course, because in Europe, by the way, England, UK, the age is no longer.
Well, we're going in the other direction now.
It's one of the countries in Europe where, because every year, we're living longer and longer, and the UK came to a bit of a halt last 2 years ago. Yeah, but in places like Africa and so on, their life expectancy is much lower, so they do tend to have lower cancer rates, but not just because of the age, but also detection and so on. But then they have the opposite thing of the fact that, their diet and some of the other stuff which can increase it. So it's not a single.
Yeah. So the question you're referring to, we had a question from Andy Wilson who asked about the incidence of cancer in LMICs, and that is a complex answer, I'm guessing, from what you just said.
Interestingly, breast cancer is one of the most common cancers, but it's lower in Far East than some of the LMICs, etc., because our way of living, as we know, is that women are waiting much longer to have their children. They have fewer children. There's and it's the HRT, the hormone treatment, the replacement therapy and so on. And so, the gaps, we already know, besides the genetic factors, that the earlier a woman has a child and the longer in between breaking the hormone cycle, there's less chances of developing breast cancer, right? So, of course, but we are choosing as women because we have the possibility of having
that
kids,
luxury,
and so on. But there are consequences related to that. Fortunately, we have, screening and early detection,
Access
and
to
we have pretty
treatment,
good outcomes. But those cancer rates, for example, in Africa would be a little bit lower than, and certainly also to do with diets and all sorts of things and smoking, and let's not even go there, right?
Yeah. So I forget the statistic. Is it 40% of cancers are related to lifestyle? It's a huge proportion of cancers that we think are lifestyle related.
Yeah. Well, also depends whether you're talking about high income or low income, right?
I guess.
But yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
But certainly breast cancer is one of the things is to do with the childbearing, the breaks, and all of this.
It's really interesting, yeah.
But cancer is a multifaceted, complicated thing, and all we know is that, of course, if you don't get that, would be great. But early detection, early treatment,
are the two most important things. Yeah. Paul, aka Pictical, asked, which is more important in your opinion? I suspect I know what your answer is going to be, but which is more important in your opinion, using atomic particles for therapy or for imaging? And I suspect the answer is it's not an either or. You need to use them both together, right?
As I said, you can't treat if you don't know where it is. You need to be able to see, and then you need to be able to treat. Yeah. And if you've seen it and you can't treat it, oh gosh, yes, you have to have both.
Yeah.
Hand in hand.
We've also got another question from Anonymous who said, is there anything, in fact, we had quite a lot of questions related to this. So we asked somebody asked if there was a way that they could donate to Project STELLA. This anonymous question says, is there anything that interesting people could do to help?
Yes to both. And by the way, I put a link on the to ICEC, because one of the things is a multidisciplinary collaboration. The idea, and I didn't actually get to mention all our collaborators, but the ICEC is an NGO, International Cancer Expert Corps. Mm-hmm. And the whole idea started when Norman Coleman, who is a very well-renowned cancer expert, he came to talk at the meetings I organized, which is Physics for Health, bringing physics and people together, building those bridges I was talking about. And he presented this idea, and that's how it took off. I've actually put on the source, the ICEC link.
Yeah, and I think our moderators should be sharing that in the chat for anybody who's interested now. We
would love help, and of course, donations. And I saw the question about what about funding? And funding is a big challenge. And this is now, what do we do now? We have a CDR. This concept design report is being reviewed. This should go to a technical design report. So once we have a technical design, we want to build it. To build it, we need funding.
Yeah.
Yes. So funding is a big issue.
Again, it comes back to the benefit of collaboration, because it's great to have all these pie in the sky, beautiful technology options. But you need somebody who's thinking about the money and seeking the funding and helping.
Our ICEC collaborators are, really hard at it, trying to get fundraising and looking at, foundations and family things and so on. But funding is a big issue. So now I think we are at a stage where we've identified the challenges. We've got a concept. This is now being reviewed to give us technical design. So now, we need to get to that next stage. Yeah. And in hand, we need the education, mentoring, and training, because suddenly we get the money, we get the machine tomorrow. Who's going to treat the patients, right? So everything has to happen in parallel, and we have to develop this thing, right?
We have got another question from Nadia, who asked, many low-income countries have high levels of corruption, I guess politically. How do you ensure the equipment doesn't get into wrong hands and is really accessible and affordable?
Well, that's $1 million question, isn't it? And this is where building trusting, long-lasting collaborations are a key, right? Sustainable trust.
You're not just pumping a load of money in, you're actually
because it doesn't
supporting the whole system.
No, because, that's right. So I think that, because it's what's the word? I would say not only is a multifaceted problem, it's a multifaceted solution. And I think starting also getting their trust and showing them that it's really important, that it's going to help them, it's going to help their families, it's going to help their countries.
That you're not just going to suddenly pull out at the last minute, I guess.
And actually what we want to do is we want to give them the grains to grow their own crops, so to speak. Okay. Yeah. And we are here, and one of the models we've been working on is sort of wisdom, because in the West we retire, right? But our life expectancy, as we know, is much longer, and there are so many talented people who want to be able to do something good. So, we think that this idea of mentoring, twinning, and so on is also leveraging that. So they form training, mentorship, twinning programs with long-term relationships, because I think this is the key. Fortunately, one thing that's come out of the COVID times, there is something, and that is, although there's nothing like face-to-face discussion,
we've got much better at virtual.
Virtual technologies, they will never substitute face-to-face, but they can really help with this. Yeah. And so when you're talking about mentoring and long-term, continued relationships, so you can do some physical trips, either going to Africa or coming back, but then a lot of it can be continued online. You
can have like that visible connection to problem solve. In the interim, yeah.
You see, problem solved, but sometimes it's just moral support. Sometimes it's just to chivvy them along, say, don't worry, and for them to know that there's somebody out there that's really looking for
them. Rusbit's asked, what do you think or hope will come after the release of the report?
Well, you hope that they are going to... Okay, so one thing is we want to have we are scientists, we want a really critical evaluation to see that we've considered all the factors which we think are going to be the next super duper wonderful machine that's going to address the challenges I was talking about, right? So what we are hoping is that, and we have experts evaluating it, so that if there are some weaknesses and chinks and things that need to be filled, that we will be given ideas about that. There might be some ideas which we never thought about. So, why don't you do this and this? So once we've got that, then the next thing is to build what is called the technical design report, which then leads to building a prototype.
Yeah.
That's the next bit.
Which sounds really exciting.
It is, and I don't have to build it, somebody else.
So even more exciting.
There are experts who can do that, fortunately.
Another anonymous question, but I think we've asked that. So I've got a question here from an anonymous person who said that STELLA sounds a great way of getting life-saving technologies to places which currently don't have it, but how will funding be sought? But I think we've covered that already.
Please help us. And by the way, we want STELLA to become stellar.
Well, I had to bite my tongue and try really hard not to say that you'd had a stellar talk, because I think it was a fantastic talk, but I think I would have got boos in the chat for the level of cheese.
No, but this is what we're missing now. We've got where we are with STELLA. To make it stellar, we need the funding, we need the next steps, we need the machine.
Yeah, because it's great to have all these ideas and solutions, but actually your goal is to get this out there in those countries that need it most.
Concrete. It's not just about dreaming. We want this to be real, because why? Because there are people out there who desperately need this.
And I guess that can be a problem that we often have, is that we're very good in higher income countries of having brilliant ideas and losing momentum before we put them into place if we can't immediately see the benefit to us, if it's the financial benefit for companies or the benefit to that higher. And it's interesting that you say, we get these systems in place, they will also benefit the higher income countries, because... Yes,
they will. This is, don't forget, especially after COVID and so on, our health systems are really under a lot of pressure. Yeah. And so if you can build a machine which is smarter and it needs fewer experts, it's going to not only be cheap to get, but cheaper to run, but you need fewer people. And in high-income countries, people are expensive.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. We've got another anonymous question. The UK appears to be past peak radiotherapy usage. Will the problems of RT access be solved by newer technologies, or are these even more inaccessible?
In the UK?
Yeah.
Well,
and I guess you could extend that to the other higher income countries.
Yes, that's right. No. So the thing is, in the UK, just like everywhere else, although slightly less so, we are living longer, so cancer rates are going up. And the last time we looked at the numbers in the UK, is just below 200,000. It's like 190,000 per machine. The IAEA, which is the authority which looks at this, they think that some of the high-income countries actually needs a machine for 100,000 people and so on.
So doubly subscribed.
So the machines need to become smarter, faster, and maybe fewer fractions, some ideas. And so the answer to the question is, there are, one thing is to optimize the machines we have. Second thing is, as I said, if you make robust machines which are cheaper and need less people, then you can have more machines, right? I mean, I grew up in Stafford and we don't have a radiation therapy unit. So I'd like to be able to, well, not that I want to have it, but if I needed it, wouldn't want to go to Birmingham or Stoke or whatever. Okay, but whatever. The other things that people are looking at is, there's lots of research going on with immunotherapy, with chemotherapy, with targeted theragnostics, which treat and detect. So there's lots of things that are coming out there. And then there are new types of radiation therapy. And I saw the question about flash, but I'm going to come to that in a minute as well. Because, in the UK, after a long time from others, we now have something called proton therapy. So protons are 2,000 times bigger than electrons, which is X-ray therapy. So if it's 2,000 times bigger, it has bigger hammer, right? So it's more effective. But it means because it's larger, you need more complicated machines. They're more expensive. Expensive. And it's like the Bragg peak, as I said, it's like going to a laser, but it's a Damocles sword. So you better not miss it, right? So you need to be able to have your imaging better, so on. And so now at the moment, we have 2 National Health Service machines, one in Manchester, the other one is going to be in UCL. And there are a few smaller ones, which are private single-room facilities. And of course, now we would also like to have carbon machines, which are even bigger hammers and they treat tumors which are radio-resistant, so they know whatever. So there's lots of new technologies. And the reason I'm answering this is because it's all about, do you want smarter machines? Do you want better optimization? Do you want the quantum leap? But you have to do everything if you want to be in a high-income country because you can afford it. And then there's the latest thing, which is called flash. And it's like, as I was saying to you, like it's Flash Gordon type thing. The whole idea of flash is that if you give lots of energy, lots of radiation, in a very short time, it looks like there's lots of proof of the pudding to be done, in testing. It looks like that if you do a large amount of dose, you treat it, the tumor is killed, tumor cells, healthy tissues are protected. Now,
so is the theory there that the tumor cells are more sensitive? Obviously, your goal is to only target the tumor cells as best you can. But I guess, and this is true of, so I've worked a lot in how we use drugs to treat cancer, and often actually cancer cells are much more susceptible to the drugs than healthy cells. Is that also true of this type of radiation?
This radiation therapy. So the mechanisms are being looked at, something to do with oxygen levels. But what is really, if that was true and if it really worked out, and this I didn't explain today at all during my talk, that one of the reasons when you're having radiation therapy treatment and you have it for 5 or 6 weeks is that you give the dose and our healthy cells, they're normal cells, they're dividing much more slowly. They have time to repair themselves. Cancer cells are dividing really, really quickly. So when they are given this DNA stuff that,
they're really affected by the DNA damage.
That's right, DNA damage. So this is why, so if you gave the whole dose of 5-6 weeks, which would do, the tumor would die, but so would the patient, unfortunately. So the idea of fractionation or giving fractions is to give your healthy tissues an advantage over the cancer tissues, right? And try to protect the damage to the healthy tissues. Remember, I was talking about the conformality. So if you had suddenly had a way, and this is, I don't know if it's going to work or not, this idea of flash, that you could give a huge amount of dose in a very short time, and you would kill your tumor, not the healthy tissue, you wouldn't need to fractionate, right?
And hopefully, I guess you'd have far fewer side effects for the patient as well.
But who knows? But but this is the sort of idea. So this would be really interesting. So rather than going for 6 weeks, maybe you'd go 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And you would have better outcomes, because actually we already know from a lot of the biological research, which you've been doing as well, that if you can kill the cells quicker, then you have better outcomes.
Yeah,
but the challenge is always, how do you make sure that you only kill the tumor cells quicker without damaging the healthy tissue?
And it's a really interesting problem that I think for a long time we've not always prioritized. It's we just get the heavy drugs in, the heavy radiation as much as we can, kill the tumor. And if that damages healthy cells, well, it's a price to pay for saving your life. But long term, we need to minimize side effects.
There are long-term effects. And this is why, particularly, if you have pediatric tumors and things like this, or the organs are critical, the tumor is near critical organs and so on. Yes, you do have side effects, And so there's lots of research going on. 1, to have better outcomes. 2, to have fewer side effects. And 3, that you can treat more patients faster, because the number of patients is going up, because the cancer rates are going up.
Yeah.
Without increasing our health budget.
Yeah, exactly.
So
it is, and I think that perfectly highlights just how complex a problem cancer is.
So we need personalized treatment. That would be the perfect thing, with the molecular cell biology and all of these things, rather than giving, one drug, which we don't know if it works for everybody, knowing that works, whether it's a drug or the radiation for that patient. So you actually save on the health bills, because you're not giving this thing to everybody, and you get better care. But this is what personalized medicine is all about, right?
And maybe we'll get there one of these days.
We're going to go to the Star Trek.
We'll get there one of these days.
Remember the phaser in the Star Trek?
Yeah.
That's what we're looking for. We're not there yet.
I think we're ready to wrap up for our evening tonight, but I've got one more question for you. We like to round up the evening on a slightly more fun question. So we've got a question from Anonymous. Is a CAT scan a PET scan?
Why not? Well, you can do a PET scan on cats.
Oh, I'm sure you can. I'm sure you can also do a CAT scan on cats.
You can do a CAT scan on pets. That's what you can. You can do both. I like that. Yes, well, I'm glad somebody has a good sense of humor.
Yes, well, you need it, especially if you're working in fields like cancer, I guess. Thank you so much for your time tonight, Manjit. We've had a fantastic time. It was a really interesting talk, and I know people have really enjoyed it in the chat. Everybody who's watching, and Manjit as well, if you are very welcome to join us. We're going to have the Lock-ins Razor opening in a couple of minutes over on Zoom. The link for that will be in the chat. It should also be easy to find on our website. Just to let you know that next week we've got a talk from Professor Rory O'Connor, who's going to be talking about his new book, where he's looked at myths around suicide. Obviously, that might be quite a sensitive topic for a lot of people. So feel free to skip that if you need to, but that's the talk we're going to have. Join us now in the Lock-ins Razor if you'd like to, and otherwise we'll see you either next week or the week after. Thank you very much.
Great.